Thomas, thanks so much for joining us inside the Ice House.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So in October, you were appointed Eli Lilly's first AI officer. Now, being the first in a role comes with the challenge and, of course, the opportunity of setting the tone early on. How do you think about building not just AI capabilities, but setting the tone to build the right culture, the right mindset, and internal trust about using AI responsibly at Eli Lilly?
That's actually a very good point. First of all, it's a great privilege to be the first one to be in that role. There's a lot of trust the leadership team put into me in doing so, and I'm very appreciative of that. And there's, of course, enormous opportunity. So Lilly is at a very unique point in time where we can really leap forward in multiple areas, and AI is for sure one of these areas where we absolutely want to do that. So one of the most important things, actually, maybe let's start really deep in the trenches, and I tell my team all the time, is machine learning and AI, it's really the art of the failure. So you try to model something, you fail. You try to model something, you fail. And you do that over and over and over again. And very often after months of work, you have nothing except a better understanding of the problem. And that's really the scientific loop in practice. That's also why machine learning and AI is so successful. And so that's now part of that culture. So we have to do things that are very risky in terms of technological risk, right? Always safe for patients. But technologically, we are really at the forefront of what we can do with AI in building medicines, finding drugs. And that, of course, includes a lot of failure, and that's part of the culture. And then you have, of course, the usual staples with deep integration into the business, deep integration into the science efforts. So we set up joint teams from discovery to manufacturing where we are all together in the trenches. You really have to understand the problems in depth to make progress with AI in these areas.
And you have a company like Lilly that is so steeped in history and innovation and success and discovery. What was the process like in inspiring executives and colleagues at such a legacy brand to buy into what AI is now, but also the long-term potential of what AI could be?
So I had the enormous luxury to get actually into a place where that was already the case mostly, right? So Diogo Rao, who did a fabulous job as Chief Information Officer to get the company up and running in terms of AI. Lilly was already using language models throughout the company in hundreds of examples where they are used for workforce improvement, workflow enhancement, and so forth. Fabulous. Dave and Dan are enormously supportive, and they saw the future already before they brought me on board. What I can bring to the table is to really push the envelope even further. And that, of course, means also bringing many more within Lilly on board. Right? Again, to make progress, you really need, for example, in discovery, the chemists on board. Right? And of course, many of them in a very traditional company have done it one way, very, very successfully. But to be successful in the future, you might also want to do some things differently and take advantage of the AI tools we have. And that means, of course, consensus building, a lot of explaining what AI can do and what it cannot do.
So I want to begin really with AI's impact on pharmaceuticals. And I'm curious how you think about just the magnitude and the pace of transformation as a whole. How would you describe the role AI is playing in just shaping the industry? Do you think we're at a point where AI is making fundamental changes to like drug discovery and drug development? Or do you think we're still a little bit away from that really taking shape?
So we are at the tipping point. Historically, I understand that people are skeptical, for example, in the discovery side, right? There are very few examples out there where you would have a really de novo designed AI drug yet. But that's changing drastically. It's changing because of, first of all, progress in, of course, maths and machine learning. So we have better models to approach these problems, but we also have drastically more compute. And that, of course, allows us to do so much more. So supercomputers at a scale that weren't present just a few years back, and that allows us to push that envelope. So we have internal models that already propose molecules for some of our targets with new motives the chemists haven't thought about before, which are very successful. So I'm very, very bullish on that front. But then, of course, there's much more to producing medicines than the discovery and development development phase, we also do a lot of AI in development, in manufacturing. Development as well, but also manufacturing. And that's, of course, an area that's very, very important for Lilly. And there are many areas, from optimizing all kinds of processes, from API production to digital twins of manufacturing lines to robotics, where AI can have very, very concrete impact and where we already see enormous returns of investment now. And then, of course, in development for trial enrollment, for executing trials more efficiently and so forth. So yes, the future is coming. It's changing very quickly, which is very positive, because of course we want to get out more drugs for more patients as soon as possible.
And how do you infuse the trust factor in it? Because when you talk to the common person, right, there's so much information being thrown at them around AI across all industries, not just pharmaceuticals. But how at Lilly do you infuse that trust factor into AI to make sure that the patients, the ones ultimately the really the most important stakeholder, they trust that the AI at Lilly is using is 100%?
Yeah, very good point. And that means also trust, first of all, internally, and then also trust externally with patients. And you're also right. So that's the dark side of the hype is, of course, that there is enormous fluff out there, right? A million companies who sell snake oil, a lot of confusion in that space. And so looking back, I actually got my PhD in machine learning at a time where it was not cool, right? Where the largest conference was 400 people, right? And it's of course nice it changed, but now you have to actually fight that hype. And you can do that with a very sober outlook and a very clear vision of what we can do and what we cannot do. So we do a lot of education internally and training and giving talks and explain where the limits of the current models are. The current models don't have any will or volition. We wouldn't even know how to get there. These language models are next token predictors, which are enormously powerful, but will not get us to AGI. So a lot of the fears are overblown. These models will not replace roles, they will replace tasks. And for these, they are very, very useful. And we have to guarantee that they are safe and effective and equitable for all patients. And we do that from the beginning within development of these models, testing these models, tracking these models, having data provenance, and then running trials, or in the future using them as endpoints, for example, in trials. You have to make sure you have to do all these steps, and you can do that.
And so most of the headlines, we talked a little bit about it before, most of the headlines tend to focus on AI and R&D when it comes to pharmaceuticals. But I'm sure, as you even mentioned, there's a much bigger story to tell across the pharma value chain of how AI is being used. It's not just in drug discovery, it's not just in development, it's in things like manufacturing, as you mentioned. So what else, or where else are you seeing AI make a meaningful impact across the broad industry? You mentioned manufacturing, but is it in things like supply chain, strategy, elsewhere, et cetera?
Yes, of course. So first of all, of course, the current models are very good in language. So anything that touches language, we try to use AI. So that means, for example, improvement in call centers, contact centers, internally, externally, in preparing documents for regulatory bodies, helping us to answer, for example, questions to the FDA, and then, for example, internally for managing trials, trial enrollment at scale. So anything with language, these are no-brainers to touch. But of course, there's a lot of AI outside of language. And that's for pharma, that's actually often more interesting. One thing is, of course, the biochemical space we talked about, that is discovery. The other one in manufacturing is, for example, image-based. So we use computer vision for quality control, quality assurance on the manufacturing lines. We use a lot of digital twinning at different granularity that help us to optimize processes drastically. And then, of course, there's also a lot of time-dependent data. So we have an AI team that, for example, looks at financial forecasting, all kinds of forecasting of more than 1,000 profit centers within the company, forex forecasting, and or time-dependent data, again, from machinery, right? So all that telemetry that comes out of robotics and these machines. So there's really a plethora you can do with AI, and we have a lot of teams in these different areas, and that also makes it so exciting to be in a place at Lilly, because it's not a one-trick pony. It's really everything, right?
Yeah.
And you can't drop any of these balls. If you would just focus only on discovery, you would immediately get blocked in development. If you only do development and not manufacturing, you get to the bottlenecks in manufacturing. And then at the end, of course, finance, but also, for example, commercial, right? So we do solve traveling salesman problems, right? Help to contact HCPs and so forth.
So as someone who sort of grew up in machine learning, now obviously serving as chief AI officer at Eli Lilly, you mentioned there's so much excitement, right, of what AI is doing right now, but obviously what AI could potentially do in the future. But with that excitement, obviously comes a lot of skepticism too about the dangers of the potential dangers of what AI could bring. How do you balance those and really try to appease or suppress might not be the right word, but try to calm some of those nerves, some of those worries, and tell people that, yes, obviously AI's future, a lot of it is unknown, but we here at Lilly know that where we're going to use AI in the long term is going to be beneficial for us, as well as obviously for the patients that are getting our drugs.
A lot is, of course, again, communication, education, right? Constantly pointing people to the right information sources, to have really a really sober look at the whole scenario. I mean, we saw that before. So when I was, for example, building the AI department at Mount Sinai, or even before at Sloan Kettering, these were times when physicians were extremely skeptical, right, about AI. So you had to do that constantly to explain that, yes, we can contribute something to cancer diagnostics, for example. And now, these days, every MD wants to be an AI expert. So the world completely changed, of course. So that's positive, but of course you have to differentiate the wheat from the chaff in the information space to do so. And that's how we help everyone. And then one way to actually also reduce the anxiety is AI is not magic, right? Everyone internally, when we engage in these models, these fabulous large language models, for example, right, constantly fail in very specific use cases, because they are, of course, models that statistically are very good in what they are trained of, and as soon as they are out of their normal distribution, then they start to fail. And in these areas, of course, it becomes very interesting to develop your own, to fine-tune your own, or we also build foundation models from scratch. And that also shows everybody within the company that their expertise in their business area or their therapeutic area is absolutely key to make that work. Right? You cannot just throw these problems into a LLM and expect an answer that solves your problem.
So one of the most, I think, anticipated frontiers is how AI might empower patients and providers directly through things like predictive tools, personalized treatment, even digital therapeutics potentially. So how is Lilly enhancing the patient journey and supporting physicians with better data-informed decision-making and AI?
Yeah, I completely agree. That's a huge, huge area where Lilly was one of the first ones to push that forward with Lilly Direct. So that means direct patient engagement with all kinds of means of communications, and language models and chatbots are one of these, right? And then, of course, also telehealth, combining telehealth in that setting, and then hopefully also getting the medicines to the patients much more quickly and in a much easier way. It is, of course, a challenging task because it depends also in which country, in which jurisdiction you are, right? So we do that differently, for example, in Brazil or in Australia, than we do it in the US or in Europe. So you have to be very specific. And for a global company like Lilly, you have to consider all of that, right? So it's education of patients and then really giving them the means to get to the medicines they need as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
And so you mentioned a global company like Lilly, right? Unfortunately, there aren't a global set of rules around AI, right? Different countries have different sets of rules. So how do you manage all that? How do you balance all that? Because when you're going to a country like Brazil compared to a country like the United States, compared to England, compared to, you know, somewhere in Asia, right? You have to balance all these different rules, regulations. So what's that process like?
So we do have to stay on top of all of these because, again, the overarching goal is to produce not only medicines, but AI that's safe, effective, and equitable across the world, right? So you have to stay on top of it. That's an area where you cannot cut back. So the way we do that, first of all, internally, we have an AI registry, which actually tracks all our AI projects. So there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of projects within that for all these different areas. And then depending on the risk, it also goes through our risk function evaluation, and that's compliance, legal, cybersecurity, etc. And that helps us, first of all, to really have a great overview of what goes on and then to track everything. And then depending on where you go, you, of course, have to go deep into the regulatory setting, engage our legal teams to do so, and then prove out, of course, first and foremost, that these things do work. Digital or computational diagnostics, we know they already work. Digital therapies in some areas could be very interesting. That's certainly early days, but in some areas that's also a promising field.
So I want to quickly just touch on the sort of biotech and big pharma relationship just for a second. We're seeing, I think, a wave of AI native biotech startups that approach drug discovery like sort of a data science problem, using machine learning as really the core engine of innovation. Do you view startups more as partners, competitors, or something sort of in between? And how does this influx change the way pharmaceuticals like Eli Lilly operate?
So first of all, yes, it is a data science problem. At its core, it is data science, and the way we solve it is machine learning and AI. So that ecosystem, these are our partners foremost. For us, of course, it's always a decision what you're gonna buy and what you're gonna build. Right? And I'm always arguing we should buy what accelerates us and build what differentiates us. Sure. And what differentiates us is sometimes very unique data. So Lilly has data second to none, decades of data, from reaction data to toxicity data to molecules. All the molecules that didn't work, right, are enormously valuable, of course, right? And based off that, it makes often sense to build our own solutions for our own purposes. And we were very successful already in doing so for some of the molecules, for example, and some of the targets. But often, of course, it does not make sense to reinvent the wheel. So if you do something that can also be done outside, it's much, much better to partner. And Lilly is building out also our own ecosystem of startups. We have the Gateway Labs as incubators. We have the Catalyst 360 program. We do invest in many, many startups and sometimes acquire them.
So I want to start wrapping up our conversation. If we look ahead 5 or 10 years, how close do you think we are from a world where AI can potentially generate drug candidates, validate them, and then move them into development? Is that science fiction right now, or are there signals that this could eventually become a reality?
So we are not there yet, right? And it will not be in the next 2-3 years. Right? In 10 years, yes. Maybe sooner, maybe later. So one thing to consider is actually why is it so difficult? And that's also where people sometimes get thrown off, right? The reason we can capture language so nicely is that it's produced by our brain. It's not that old. It's 100,000 years old. It's structured. It's discrete. We have the whole internet to train on, right? But then if you go to robotics and digit manipulation, that's already millions of years of evolution, much more difficult. And then if you go down to a single cell, you have machinery after billions of years of evolution that are so complex that our human language even fails to describe them. That's why you can't throw them in an LLM and they will never be able to solve that. That's why you need dedicated models. You can combine that with LLMs and agentic workflows to orchestrate everything, but you need these dedicated models. And by scaling up these models, we are much better in actually finding de novo molecules and make sure they bind properly, they are not toxic and so forth. So in 10 years, yes. And if we envision that very positive world, then we might be in a world where we actually are very target rich and there's an abundance of molecules in silico that theoretically would bind. And then it's all development and manufacturing, right? And that's something Lilly is really, really good at.
Yeah.
Right? That's why we are pushing so hard to get to that point in AI at Lilly, because then we can play all the manufacturing and development cards to really be the dominant driver in building medicines in the future.
Absolutely. So, Thomas, as we wrap up our conversation, speaking to that same 5-10 year period, what's your vision for how AI could fundamentally influence Eli Lilly? How are you hoping the technology helps transform the organization in the next decade?
So within Lilly, AI will touch every job we have, all roles, right? And that, of course, means efficiency in some areas and doing more, of course, with what we have now. And that's table stakes. Every company is doing that. Every company should do that, right? What's really, really drives me, what's much more exciting is how we can leapfrog the whole sector, right? How can we actually produce in discovery better molecules much, much faster? That means, of course, seamless lab in the loop to go from in silico to in vitro. We built that out at various places in the world to do very, very fast, very effectively, and then go into development to run trials much faster, much more effectively. And then, of course, AI plays a huge role in all these other areas we discussed. So in manufacturing, we see significant improvement in producing more drugs faster. And then again, finance, communication, commercial, marketing, and all the direct-to-consumer space. That's why it's so important. We have to push all these areas and not do one, but doing that well.
Yeah.
Lilly will be the AI-driven medicine company of the future. And having the opportunity to be a little part of that is a huge privilege and very humbling.
Well, Thomas, congratulations again on being named Lilly's first Chief AI Officer, and thank you so much for joining us inside the Ice House.
Thank you for your time.